Annette Funicello made an entire nation believe that childhood could be preserved forever, if only through a gentle smile, a perfectly timed dance step, and a pair of innocent eyes capable of helping adults forget their worries. On screen, she was America's sweetheart, the flawless Disney girl so ideal that people wanted to place her in their living rooms as a symbol of post-war safety and reassurance. But few understood that this very purity became the mold that locked Annette's life in place. When a nation loves you for being good, you are punished simply for becoming human. Annette grew up under unspoken rules. Be gentle, be proper, never disappoint anyone. And once those rules became taken for granted, silence was no longer a choice. It became a reflex. Annette was never a star who erupted. She didn't create scandals, didn't confront the press, didn't reinvent herself to reclaim control of her image. She drifted through fame, music, film, and marriage like someone constantly trying to keep everything from falling out of rhythm because of her. But the price of always being right is that there is no space left to be wrong and no space left to hurt. Then the body began to betray her. Vague symptoms, malicious rumors, Hollywood's familiar assumptions about a former child star who had fallen apart. Annette remained silent, kept smiling, kept preserving order, until she was finally forced to speak for herself, to put an end to the stories others were telling on her behalf. This is not merely the story of a Disney icon. It is the journey of a woman who was loved in a way that never allowed her to be weak. So what happens to a person when they are taught, their entire life, that their pain is not allowed to inconvenience anyone else? Before Annette Funicello became an image that needed to be protected, she grew up in a space where no one was expected to shine. Born in 1942 in Utica, New York, Annette entered the world in a quiet industrial city where life was measured by working hours, not by public attention. 4 years later, her family moved to Southern California, like many working-class American families in the post-war years, not in pursuit of social ascent, but simply in search of a more stable rhythm of life. Her father, Joseph Funicello, ran a small auto repair shop. Her mother, Virginia Albano, stayed home to raise the children. The family was not deprived, but there was no room for indulgence either. Everything followed a familiar order: steady work, proper conduct, and an unspoken rule not to inconvenience others. In the Italian-American community where Annette was raised, children were taught that maintaining harmony mattered more than expressing oneself. Stability required no praise, and obedience was regarded as a natural virtue. Annette was a quiet child, instinctively inclined to step back when surrounded by others. At school or church gatherings, she often stood in the back row, hands clasped together, as if even a slightly forceful movement might draw unwanted attention. When asked to introduce herself, her voice would soften and hesitate. Not simply from shyness, but from long practice in letting others go first while she remained still. Dance and music entered Annette's life not as an artistic calling, but as an exercise in learning how to be proper. Her teachers taught her to keep her back straight, place her hands correctly, move with restraint, technical instructions that gradually became tools for emotional control. When she didn't know what to say, she stayed silent and held perfect posture. When nervous, she smiled instead of explaining herself. In those early years, art was not a place for self-expression. It was where she learned to gently fold herself inward. Her early childhood passed in a subdued rhythm. Annette grew up within the routine of a post-war Italian-American working-class household. School, returning home, helping with small chores, and regular participation in community activities. This environment functioned more through habit than explicit instruction. Children learned by observation, shaped by the way adults lived each day, behaving properly, preserving harmony, and adjusting themselves so as not to become a point of disruption within the group. At age 12, Annette performed in Swan Lake at the Starlight Bowl in Burbank, California. It was not a moment she experienced as destiny, but simply a performance that needed to be completed according to rehearsed timing. When Walt Disney was present in the audience and asked to meet her afterward, Annette's first reaction was not excitement, but confusion and restraint. She had never thought of herself as being discovered. To her, being noticed meant having to be even more careful about proper behavior. The invitation to audition for the Mickey Mouse Club followed soon after. In 1955, Annette attended the audition alongside more than 200 other children carrying the same familiar mindset. Follow instructions. Expect nothing. When the list of 24 Mouseketeers was announced and her name was called last, Annette barely reacted. No cheers, no tears. The moment only became tangible when the contract was placed in front of her family. 7 years, a weekly salary of $160, with gradual increases up to $500 per week. By late 1955, the Mickey Mouse Club began airing its first episodes. Annette appeared regularly in dance numbers and short skits, never introduced as a central figure. Everything initially unfolded exactly as she was used to. Stand in the correct position, fulfill her role, and step out of frame when it was someone else's turn to move forward. Only weeks later, audience response began to alter the program's internal rhythm. Fan mail sent to the studio increased rapidly, exceeding Disney's early expectations. By the end of the first season, letters addressed specifically to Annette Funicello were counted at approximately 6,000 per month, then rose to between 6,000 and 8,000 in the months that followed, the highest of any Mouseketeer. The mailroom was forced to set aside a separate bin bearing her name. For Annette, this shift did not bring a sense of victory. She did not view the volume of letters as a special distinction, but as another responsibility that needed to be handled properly. Each afternoon after filming, she stayed behind to sign autographs, according to studio guidelines, respond to selected letters, keep her handwriting neat and her tone consistent. There were no public moments of excitement, no declarations of standing out above the others. This shift did not come from a breakout role or a moment when Annette was pushed to the center of the frame. Disney took note of her reliability. Her filming schedule became denser, her placement within performances more fixed. In 1958, the Mickey Mouse Club aired its final episode. The farewell taping took place on the familiar sound stage, where Annette had appeared continuously throughout her childhood years. That day, she cried a great deal. Later in life, Annette recalled that it was the most she had ever cried. The program ended, but the work did not stop. Immediately after 1958, Annette remained at Disney and was shifted into a different rhythm of labor. The soundstage gave way to the recording studio. Songs that had previously appeared within television storylines were re-recorded and officially released under the single name Annette. The transition into music happened quickly and efficiently, not as a personal experiment, but as the next step already arranged within the studio's trajectory. In 1959, Tall Paul was released and climbed to number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song moved Annette beyond the frame of former Mouseketeer and into the rapidly expanding teen pop market. Her workload intensified noticeably: recording sessions, television appearances, promotional tours. Success arrived quickly, but the management structure surrounding Annette remained largely unchanged. That same year, Annette Funicello made her first attempt to shift her position away from the predetermined orbit around her, not through image, not through music, but through the only formal avenue available to her: the law. Annette filed a lawsuit against the Walt Disney Company, seeking to void the 7-year exclusive contract she had signed while still a minor. Her argument rested on 2 core points. First, the contract had been signed when she was underage and therefore unable to make binding long-term decisions. Second, she had no independent legal representation at the time of signing, while the terms granted Disney full control over her schedule, image, and career direction. This was not a public act of rebellion, but a calculated effort to test whether the law could create a narrow opening in a system that had been operating too smoothly around her. The case went to court and reached its conclusion quickly. The court rejected the request to void the contract. The ruling affirmed the agreement's validity, despite Annette's minor status and the evident imbalance of power between the 2 parties. No new legal precedent was set. No exception was recognized. From a legal standpoint, Disney was not required to adjust anything. Disney's response followed the logic of a confident power structure. No press release, no public comment, no changes to the working framework surrounding Annette. Recording schedules, releases, and promotional plans continued as arranged, neither slowed nor accelerated. There was no sign of retaliation, but there were no concessions either. Control remained intact, now reinforced not only by contract, but by a court ruling. On Annette's side, silence was fully maintained. No statement after the verdict, no explanations in interviews, no signs of withdrawal or confrontation. She returned to the studio, continued recording, and appeared in public according to schedule. Subsequent recordings were released regularly. Television appearances proceeded as usual, exactly as if no attempt to break free had ever taken place. The lawsuit ended without creating a pause. No turning point, no visible fracture on the surface of her career. But from that moment forward, one thing was made clear. The only legal path available for Annette to reposition herself had closed. The system did not need to speak, because the law had spoken for it. In 1960, O Dio Mio appeared on the year-end Hot 100, followed by Pineapple Princess, which reached number 11 on the Billboard chart. Individual records sold from hundreds of thousands to over 1 million copies, depending on the release, placing Annette's name regularly on radio playlists and youth-oriented music programs. Music expanded her presence beyond children's television, while simultaneously placing her at the center of a teen pop market that was rapidly accelerating. During this same period, Disney began positioning Annette in family films as a way to maintain the axis of safety in another medium. These roles were not designed to produce a transformation, but to confirm that she could carry her proper persona onto the big screen without breaking the mold. As a result, when Annette later moved into the faster, more market-driven production cycle of AIP, it did not feel like a reinvention, but rather like a different system borrowing a face already stamped as trustworthy. Her rate of appearances increased quickly, but the operational logic surrounding Annette remained almost unchanged. Music and film moved her out of children's television, but not out of the orbit of control. As her songs played regularly on the radio and her film schedule expanded in parallel, another trajectory took shape. Mass-market cinema with faster production rhythms and more easily consumable formulas. In 1963, Beach Party went into production. It was not a project expected to become a phenomenon. The production budget was only about $300,000. A modest figure even by the standards of American International Pictures B-movies. The setting was simple: beaches, pop music, young faces. Annette Funicello appeared in the film as a safe choice, familiar, easily recognizable, and already backed by a loyal audience from television and music. On screen, she was not constructed as a source of conflict or dramatic turning points, but as a stabilizing presence, consistent, approachable, and friendly throughout. Annette's performance followed that logic. She kept her pacing slower than those around her, minimized exaggerated gestures, delivered dialogue with restraint, and avoided overly broad comedy. In an environment filled with music, laughter, and flamboyant male characters, Annette maintained a soft gaze, measured reactions, and a steady presence, even as the frame itself was pushed toward exaggeration. At moments when the film's rhythm became overloaded, the camera often returned to her, not to create a climax, but to keep the visual axis from drifting away from its original structure. When the film was released, the response far exceeded initial expectations. Box office revenue in the US and Canada quickly reached between $2.3 and $3 million. For AIP, this was not just a hit, it was a repeatable formula. Sequels followed in rapid succession. Annette returned to the camera in Muscle Beach Party, then Bikini Beach, Beach Blanket Bingo. With each film, the structure remained largely unchanged. The entertainment tempo grew faster, the surrounding characters louder and more exaggerated, while Annette maintained her familiar performance style. No increase in intensity, no image shift, no pursuit of the excess building around her. That consistency meant Annette was repeatedly repositioned at the center of the frame whenever the film's energy became too chaotic. The success of Beach Party did not come from Annette changing, but from her remaining the same, a stable presence strong enough to draw audiences back, film after film. As the beach movie cycle expanded, differences in how Annette's image was perceived began to surface directly on set. American International Pictures, facing strong box office numbers, sought to push the formula further. More revealing costumes, more open framing, and a looser, more provocative atmosphere to retain the attention of a rapidly changing youth audience. For AIP, this was a market-driven adjustment, derived directly from commercial performance. Conversely, the familiar constraints surrounding Annette were not loosened. Even though Disney was no longer directly producing her work, the studio continued to uphold the expectations that had been attached to her for nearly a decade. Her image had to remain proper, must not break the mold, must not create a sense of deviation for family audiences. Two operating logics ran in parallel, never reconciled through a clear agreement, but coexisting within shooting schedules, costume choices, and the way Annette was placed within the frame. This overlap manifested in very concrete ways on set. While filming, Annette was instructed to keep her navel covered, yet in the final cut, the camera still revealed it, most clearly in Bikini Beach, where close framing made the detail impossible to ignore. There was no notice of adjustment, no public explanation. The scene was released as filmed, allowing two value systems to coexist within a single frame, with Annette standing at the center. Faced with these contradictions, Annette offered no public reaction. She did not request script changes, did not object to costume choices, nor did she ask for adjustments in how her image was constructed. In interviews from that period, she avoided mentioning differences between Disney and AIP, did not comment on backstage pressures, and did not place herself in a position of explanation or justification. Annette's response took the form of continued work, arriving on time, completing scenes as required, maintaining her familiar performance rhythm, and never pushing her roles beyond the limits that had already been established. As a result, the atmosphere behind the scenes was not loud, but not entirely calm either. Annette was referred to by diminishing nicknames such as Disney's pet. Gossip circulated within the crew, accompanied by minor incidents occurring close to shooting time, costumes being tampered with, props interfered with, none serious enough to halt production, but sufficient to create a prolonged state of tension. Annette did not respond to these incidents. She did not take the matter public, did not seek clarification, and did not allow the schedule to be disrupted. Scenes were completed on time and moved forward to release. The film cycle eventually came to an end, and with it, a professional rhythm that had run its course. Annette did not move directly into another project to maintain momentum. A gap emerged naturally, as if the system that had once placed her at its center had turned to seek other faces better suited to new tastes. Her last significant return to the big screen came with Thunder Alley. The film carried no expectation of restoring an icon, nor was it built as the starting point of a new phase. Annette played the lead with a more serious tone, less music, less display, as if attempting to close her film career with a mature image, detached from the beaches and frames that had long defined her name. After that, the big screen gradually receded. There was no announcement of retirement, only the quiet reality that leading roles no longer came her way. In the years that followed, Annette appeared sporadically on television. The roles were small, the screen time brief, insufficient to form a new career axis, but enough to maintain a connection with the public. Her presence at this stage was about continuity rather than expansion. A familiar face returning from time to time, no longer carrying the burden of leading or shaping trends. By the late 1970s, Annette appeared in Skippy commercials with an image entirely different from what audiences had once known. A calm, approachable American mother set within a middle-class domestic space. There was no longer image conflict, no debate over boundaries inside or outside the mold. This appearance was not meant to revive old glory, but to affirm a new position. Annette as part of a shared memory that had grown up alongside its audience, requiring no revalidation under stage lights. During this same period, she was invited to appear in Grease 2. Annette declined because the contract terms were not suitable. The decision was made quietly, without statements, without debate, without attempts at public explanation. She did not seek to return to the center of popular culture through a nostalgic role, nor did she use her past to negotiate the present. Everything stopped there, as Annette had so often chosen throughout her career, not to prolong a cycle once it had reached its end. From that point of pause, private life naturally moved to the center, without announcement, without declaration. Love entered Annette Funicello's life, not as an escape from the spotlight, nor as an act of rebellion against the image that had been bound to her since childhood. It arrived quietly, properly, almost as if placed exactly where life had already prepared space for it, much like the way Annette had always stepped into every important role in her life. Not stepping outside the existing order, only changing her position within it. In 1965, Annette married Jack Gilardi, an actor and producer. The marriage took place while the image of America's sweetheart was still clearly present in public life, and while Annette herself was still recognized primarily as a symbol rather than as an individual allowed the freedom to try and err. Becoming a wife did not mean retreating from the public as someone closing the past. It meant shifting into another role within the same, familiar order. The woman expected to keep everything stable. In the years that followed, Annette gave birth to 3 children, Gina, Jack Jr., and Jason. Motherhood did not arrive with a declared change or a performative withdrawal. There was no farewell speech to the stage, no constructed image of sacrifice. Annette simply narrowed the scope of her public presence, placed family at the center of her life, and allowed professional opportunities to pass if they demanded too much friction with her new domestic rhythm. For Annette, this was not experienced as renunciation, but as a form of order that needed to be preserved. Family, like her public image before it, became a structure maintained through silence, patience, and constant adjustment. She continued doing what she had learned since childhood, fitting herself precisely into the surrounding space so that nothing would fall out of rhythm because of her presence. Yet within this prolonged calm, tensions slowly accumulated. Annette's first marriage did not dissolve through a shocking event, but through a gradual, silent misalignment over time. No scandal, no accusations, no details offered for the public to judge right or wrong. Differences went unnamed, exhaustion unspoken. The separation occurred in 1981, cleanly and quietly, in keeping with the way Annette had always faced rupture in her life, without exposure, without explanation, without leaving anything behind for outside scrutiny. After her first marriage ended, Annette did not return to the spotlight in search of renewed validation. She did not use fame to fill personal emptiness, nor did she turn her private life into a story to be told. Instead, she entered another relationship, slower, more discreet, and less governed by the molds that had once controlled her earlier life. In 1986, Annette married Glenn Holt, a man outside the center of the entertainment industry. This second marriage was not built on glamour or public expectation, but on something Annette had always valued yet rarely possessed in the past: the feeling of existing without having to maintain an image. It was not a love narrated through climactic moments, but through the endurance of shared life, where Annette no longer had to stand at the center, yet still retained her familiar habits, placing others' needs first, keeping everything in order and allowing her own emotions to recede into the background. Notably, even in her private life, Annette rarely allowed herself to become the one who demanded. She spoke little of unmet personal desires and did not let small conflicts grow into confrontation. As in her career, Annette chose to keep things running smoothly, even when that meant she herself gradually withdrew from the center of her own life. Just 1 year later, a familiar invitation arrived. Back to the Beach was proposed as a gentle reunion, not an attempt to revive a trend, not a cultural ambition, merely a nod to memory. Annette agreed to participate, not as a return to the center, but as a carefully controlled appearance. On set, everything followed the old rhythm: sunlight, music, familiar faces, laughter placed where it belonged. Yet it was here that the first signs began to surface, not clear enough to be named, but sufficient for Annette to sense that her body was beginning to operate differently. At first, it was fatigue disproportionate to the workload. Then brief moments of imbalance, a faint numbness in her limbs, small delays in reflexes that others might overlook. But Annette did not. She told no one, not the crew, not her co-stars. For Annette, these were not things to be named, but things to be kept in order, just like so many aspects of her life before. After Back to the Beach was completed, Annette returned to private life. The symptoms did not disappear. They appeared sporadically, without a consistent pattern, making it difficult to define them as a problem. Annette continued doing what she had done for decades, adjusting her schedule, reducing appearances, choosing silence over explanation. There was no announcement of rest, no health statement, no public narrative offered. That silence was quickly filled by assumptions from the outside. As Annette appeared less frequently, the media began to ask questions. When her gait changed in a few rare on-camera appearances, rumors began to circulate. Some said she was declining. Others whispered about alcohol. Articles revived a familiar Hollywood motif: the child star who could not bear the weight of the past. Old phrases were pulled out and applied to a woman who had long since stepped away from the spotlight, as if the public still needed an easily digestible explanation for her absence. Annette responded to none of it. She did not correct the record. She issued no health statement. She made no effort to restore her image. In her rare appearances, she maintained her familiar demeanor, speaking just enough, smiling properly, leaving early. For Annette, being misunderstood was not new. What was new was that, for the first time in her life, her silence was no longer read as a virtue, but interpreted as decline. The years that followed passed in a state of quiet tension. Annette's body continued to send increasingly clear signals, while the outside world kept assigning her stories that did not belong to her. Within the family space, Glenn Holt witnessed the changes little by little, not through dramatic incidents, but through small details: a slower walk, longer periods of rest, a growing carefulness in activities that had once been simple. Annette still did not speak, not because she was unafraid, but because she had never learned how to place her fear into shared speech. The decision to go public about her illness did not come as an immediate reaction, but as a point of threshold. It was the moment Annette realized that silence, for the first time in her life, could no longer protect the order she had worked so hard to maintain. When rumors began to eclipse the truth, when her image was distorted in ways she could no longer control, Annette was forced to do something she rarely did: speak about herself. In 1992, Annette Funicello publicly revealed that she had multiple sclerosis. The disclosure did not take place on live television, nor was it tied to a campaign seeking sympathy. Annette chose to speak through a print interview in an even, restrained tone, describing her condition as a reality that needed to be placed properly, not as a story designed to guide emotion. There was no language of battle, no promise of overcoming. Annette did not dramatize her experience, nor did she use illness to reposition her image. She simply put the truth where it belonged, after years of letting others speak in her place. Public reaction shifted almost instantly. Rumors dissolved. Assumptions were quietly withdrawn. For the first time in many years, Annette no longer carried a story constructed by others. Not because she was pitied, but because she had reclaimed the right to name her own experience. That same year, Annette was honored as a Disney legend. The title did not arrive as a reward for endurance, but as a belated acknowledgement of a journey that had nearly completed its arc. Standing in that space, between Disney memory and the reality of a changing body, Annette did not speak as an icon, nor did she look back on the past with nostalgia. She was present in the way she had always lived, quietly, fully, without raising her voice to affirm anything. This chapter did not end in victory. It ended with a truth placed in its proper position, and with a person who, for the first time, allowed herself to speak not to make noise, but to end misunderstandings that had lasted far too long. From there, Annette entered the remaining phase of her life, no longer as an image that needed preserving, but as a human being learning how to live with the limits of her own body, in silence, but no longer misunderstood. After going public with her illness, Annette Funicello did not enter a phase of fighting in the familiar media sense. She did not appear frequently to recount a journey of overcoming hardship, nor did she turn illness into a new narrative axis. Instead, Annette withdrew further into private life, allowing what needed to be done to happen quietly, and letting what was no longer necessary fall away on its own. In 1993, Annette received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The ceremony was dignified, but not loud. For Annette, it was not a milestone for revisiting glory, but a late confirmation that what she had done, in silence, in discipline, in always holding her place, had left a mark that endured. Around the same time, she participated in fundraising and supported neurological research related to multiple sclerosis, not as a spokesperson, but as someone who understood the value of turning personal experience into something useful for others. There was no personalized campaign, no pre-constructed inspirational narrative, only steady work, done in the way Annette had always chosen. Her body, meanwhile, continued to narrow its range of movement. What had once unfolded slowly and quietly now became more visible. By the mid-2000s, Annette lost the ability to walk independently. Movement became a series of small calculations. Distance, timing, required assistance. There was no announcement to mark that moment. Life was simply rearranged, detail by detail, to fit new limits. Within that space, Glenn Holt gradually became her full-time caregiver. The transition did not occur through vows or declarations of sacrifice, but through daily rhythm. Waking up, assisting, waiting, adjusting. The roles of husband and caregiver merged without needing definition. Annette spoke little about it, but Glenn's steady presence became the structure that kept life from collapsing as her body continued to withdraw. By the late 2000s, Annette gradually lost the ability to speak. The process did not unfold as a sudden rupture, but as a layered withdrawal. At first, sentences grew shorter. Pauses between words stretched longer. Then her voice weakened, no longer strong enough to carry across a room. This change did not overturn daily life in a dramatic way. She did not cling to speech as a final symbol of herself. Instead, communication was quietly reorganized as so many things in her life had been before. Eye contact became the primary channel. Very small gestures, a slight nod, a gentle squeeze of the hand, a change in breathing, carried more meaning than words ever could. She did not try to compensate for silence with exaggerated expression, nor did she allow the limitation to become a statement. Annette's presence at this point was purer than ever, without words, without a public image, without a role to sustain. If there was one change that stood out, it was the way time was felt. Without speech to fill the gaps, each moment appeared more clearly. Annette lived within those moments with a quiet awareness, as if she had long been accustomed to stepping away from the center, and was now simply continuing that habit in a more absolute form. Language left Annette without creating a noisy absence. It merely closed one channel of communication, while others remained active. Gaze, presence, and the enduring bond with those closest to her. Not as replacements, but as what remained of a life that had always spoken less than the world expected. From that point on, Annette's life narrowed almost entirely to the domestic space. Daily routines were organized around the body's new limits, a slower pace, minimal communication, habits repeated consistently to avoid disruption. Stability was no longer a comfort, but a condition for life to continue functioning at all. It was within this fragile state that Annette's home was damaged by a fire in 2011. No one was injured, but the family was forced to leave the familiar space, one that had been carefully adjusted, detail by detail, to accommodate her health. Pathways, rest points, and daily rhythms that had been precisely measured suddenly became invalid. In a home arranged like a safety map, losing even one night of familiarity was enough to send everything back to the starting line. No additional tragedy was needed. Just the raw fact. When the body has no margin left, an external disruption can become an entire structure that must be rebuilt. The incident did not prompt a public response. Annette didn't appear before the media afterward. There were no updated images, no reassurances. The event was handled within the family, as every other challenge in her later years had been, discreetly, quietly, without opening a new story to the outside world. In a life already reduced to the minimum, the fire exposed a simple but harsh truth. Even the most carefully maintained structures can be affected from the outside. Not to create another tragedy, but to show that fragility does not come only from the body, but also from circumstance. things Annette could no longer manage through her familiar silence. After that, life continued, not in the sense of returning to what it had been, but in the sense of accepting a new order, less stable, yet still upheld by the same principle that had guided Annette throughout her life. No display, no explanation, and no surrendering to the outside world the right to decide how her story should be told. The final years passed under continuous care, almost completely sealed off from the outside world. When the body no longer allowed it, Annette made no effort to maintain an image, nor did she allow others to tell her story for her. In 2013, Annette Funicello passed away at the age of 70, after many years living within the body's increasingly narrow limits. Her death did not take place before cameras, nor was it tied to a public moment or a prepared farewell. It occurred in the same way Annette had lived most of her adult life, quietly, privately, and outside the need to be witnessed. There was no public-facing final word, no last message, crafted to close a famous journey. Her family was with her in her final days, within a space long accustomed to slow rhythms, continuous care, and minimal forms of communication. Annette's presence at that time was no longer measured by words or gestures, but by the simple fact that she was still there, like a quiet center around which those closest to her revolved. When news of Annette's death was announced, the public response carried a different tone from what is usually seen with former stars. There was no delayed shock, no urge to reconstruct tragedy, no sensational stories pulled out to retell her life. Instead, there was a settling silence, as if many recognized that Annette had left the center of the spotlight long ago, and death merely confirmed that fact officially. Tributes mentioned her smile, her gentleness, and the image of America's sweetheart. But what stood out most was not the myth. It was the sense that Annette had preserved something rare in the entertainment world: dignity. Not through bold declarations, not through confrontation or public reinvention, but through a consistent choice sustained over decades. The choice to remain silent when needed, to step back when the time came, and to refuse to let private life be consumed as a story. Annette Funicello is not remembered for the number of roles she played, nor for revolutionary turning points in American entertainment history. What remains of her exists on another level, quieter, more enduring, where the presence of a human being is preserved without the need for constant redefinition. In an industry accustomed to operating through change, Annette was a rare exception, a continuous rhythm that never broke. From the Mickey Mouse Club to the beach film cycle, and then the years of retreat from the center, Annette did not leave behind a final image that needed protection. She left behind a series of consistent choices, where each stage did not negate the previous one, but layered over it like sediment. No image reversal, no attempt to reinvent herself to keep pace with taste. Annette chose to remain still while the world moved, and it is precisely that stillness that made her a stable marker in collective memory. What remains after Annette Funicello is not the image of an icon battling illness, nor a story of decline. It is the trace of a person who lived fully within her limits, who accepted withdrawal not as failure, and who preserved her character even as her body gradually withdrew from her. Annette departed without needing further explanation. And perhaps that is the most fitting ending for a life that always chose to speak just enough and to be fully present in a world accustomed to being driven by change.